Before we move to First Minister's question, members will wish to join me in welcoming to the gallery the President of the Australian Senate, the Honourable John Hogg. I move to First Minister's question. Number one, Joanne Lamont.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. If I may depart from protocol for a second in this very important week, because of course I've often disagreed with him, frequently I've complained about his tactics and his way of going about things, but I do not doubt his commitment to Scotland, which we all share in different ways. So I ask the whole Parliament right now to pay tribute to Craig Levein. And may I, of course, congratulate the First Minister on his longevity, and may I ask him what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day.
First Minister.
Well, I think the whole chamber should congratulate President Obama on his re-election to the greatest democracy in the world. And Glasgow Celtic over their outstanding victory over what many people think is the greatest team in the world.
Joanne Lamont.
I have absolutely no difficulty in agreeing with the First Minister on those two counts. First Minister, according to Audit Scotland, the NHS has an outstanding £1 billion bill in terms of repairs. We have lost more than 2,000 nurses. The First Minister has imposed real-term cuts to the NHS of almost £200 million. Yesterday, the Auditor-General, Caroline Gardner, said the NHS in Scotland was on, and I quote, an amber warning. Does the First Minister agree with the Auditor-General?
First Minister.
Well, the Audit Scotland report obviously pointed out that Scotland's health service was well managed in terms of its finances. I know that Joanne Lamont will want to concede now there are more people working in the National Health Service in Scotland than when the SNP took office. And more importantly, perhaps, on every single judgment of output on waiting lists, patient care, Scotland's National Health Service is performing in outstanding fashion.
Joanne Lamont.
I have to say that the First Minister's breathtaking complacency in the face of a serious warning from the Auditor-General that the NHS is on an amber warning does him and his government no service whatsoever. People of this country deserve better. It's clear the First Minister doesn't agree with the Auditor-General then on the NHS. And when we said that the Scottish Government had cut spending on colleges by a quarter, both he and his Education Minister said we were wrong. They said we were scaremongering. The Auditor-General has now said, not once, but twice, that college budgets have been cut by 24% in real terms. Is she right, or is she scaremongering too?
First Minister.
Well, as far as the National Health Service is concerned, can I point out that this government has protected the spending of the health boards and revenue budget of the National Health Service in real terms. And just in case the former Deputy Leader of the Labour Party in Scotland forgets, when she was Deputy Leader, the Labour Party refused to make that commitment in last year's election campaign. And as far as Scotland's colleges are concerned, she knows that we've kept to our commitment on full-time equivalent courses in Scotland's colleges. And can I just point out to Joanne Lamont that as we look forward, given the extraordinary capital investment that is going into Scotland's colleges at the present moment, that the total funding for Scotland's colleges is going to reach £655 million by 2014-15 in capital and revenue investment, which compares rather favourably, not just with the funding now, but with the £217 million when the Labour Party took office in the first devolution Parliament. In that year, incidentally, the total capital investment in Scotland's colleges was £4 million. The expectation in 2014-15 is for £184 million.
Joanne Lamont.
Charitable, I would say that's just white noise between the end of one question and the beginning of the next one. Because this is not the First Minister wants this to be a theoretical argument between him and me. This is not. This is the independent voice of the Auditor-General saying there's a serious problem in the NHS and a serious problem in college funding, and he denies it. So let me get this right. When Campbell Christie, Crawford Beveridge and the former Auditor-General Robert Black say we need to face up to a public spending crisis, the First Minister says they are wrong. When the current Auditor-General says there's a cut in college funding, she says she is wrong. When the Auditor-General then says the NHS is in crisis, she's wrong again. If he won't listen to the people who count the numbers, maybe he will listen to the people who treat patients. Theresa Fife of the RCN says, not being frank about the pressures on our health service or transparent about how money is spent is storing up problems for the future. When will the First Minister face up to reality and be straight with the people of Scotland?
First Minister.
Acknowledge the very substantial pressures on public services in Scotland, including the National Health Service. But can I put it to Joanne Lamont that things would have been a great deal worse if the Labour Party had not defended the real-term increase in revenue spending in the National Health Service, which we committed to in the election, which the Labour Party refused to commit to, which is perhaps one of the reasons why she's sitting there and I'm standing here as First Minister of Scotland. Joanne Lamont, I think, is edging towards in saying about the affordability of public services to her Cuts Commission. The review of the key pledges and promises which have defined not just the administration of the SNP but perhaps the devolution era, the commitment to having no tuition fees, so there's not an obstacle to our students going to university or college, the commitment for the pensioners so they have free travel, so they don't have to fear not being able to fund their care in infirmity. These are crucial gains of devolution, which Joanne Lamont and her party are now putting at risk. These were things that they committed to only last year in the election, but are now all up for review in the bleak midwinter Cuts Commission. These are the things on which not just this party has been judged and re-elected, but on which the Labour Party will be judged and never elected on that platform.
Joanne Lamont.
First of all, acknowledging pressures and funding is not the same as doing something about it, and that is his job. Secondly, I'm not edging towards anything. I'm asking the First Minister to listen to what the Auditor-General and to what nurses and to what doctors and to what people in public services are saying now about what's happening to their services. This is not an argument for an election. This is about understanding what is happening in the real world to ordinary people at this very time. We know the First Minister doesn't believe the Auditor-General or a predecessor. He doesn't believe the experts he himself appoints. Can I ask him, does he believe himself when he, Alex Salmond, said, and I quote, politicians should have a higher duty, and the duty is more to the economic cycle than the political cycle. Now, I read that to understand that politicians should always put the interests of their country before the interests of their party. So, when will he come and join the rest of us in the real world? When will he face up? When will he face up to the cuts happening now in the real world and the £3 billion worth of cuts he is delaying until after his referendum? Does Alex Salmond still believe Alex Salmond, or has he joined the rest of Scotland in not believing a word the First Minister says?
First Minister.
On points of correction, the Auditor-General never said that the National Health Service of Scotland was in crisis. On the contrary, the Auditor-General report pointed out that health boards were well managed, and Campbell Christie nor Crawford Beveridge ever called for real-term cuts in the National Health Service in Scotland. We have maintained real-term spending in the revenue of the National Health Service in Scotland, something that the Labour Party refused to do. That doesn't mean there's no pressure. How couldn't there be pressure when this government and every public service is facing the cuts from Westminster? But can I say to Joanne Lamont that there is no solution to addressing the problem of cuts from Westminster than threatening, as the Labour Party is now doing, to cut the vital services to pensioners and students in Scotland. And this, well, she is the fourth Labour leader that I've faced across the chamber. I tell her if she pursues this line, she will certainly not be the last Labour leader that I face across this chamber, because she's putting forward to the people of Scotland right now the incredible proposition that somehow free care, personal care for the elderly is unaffordable, that free concessionary fares for the elderly are unaffordable, that abolition of student fees, tuition fees, is unaffordable, and all the range of other things she wants to cut from the Scottish people, but she maintains the £163 million that Scotland currently contributes to the furbishment and refurbishment of the Trident missile system is somehow affordable. How can the Labour Party maintain a position that spending on weapons of mass destruction is essential, but services for the people of Scotland can be dispensed with? On that programme, they shall never be re-elected in this Parliament.
Order. Ruth Lamont. Sorry, Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister when he'll next meet the Prime Minister.
First Minister.
I'm sure that was not intentional. But maybe appropriate given the circumstances of the Better Together campaign. But nonetheless, I have no plans to meet the Prime Minister in the near future.
My apologies, Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Let's stick with the Auditor General, because this week Audit Scotland published a highly critical report showing that reoffending costs Scotland £3 billion a year. The First Minister has had 5 years to get this right, so why, according to the Auditor General, is there such, and I quote, a mismatch between what is delivered and what is known to work to tackle reoffending?
First Minister.
Can I say to Ruth Davidson, there are substantial signs of progress in the Scottish justice system. You don't get the lowest level of recorded crime for 37 years without establishing progress within the justice system. That is something which I believe has been largely contributed to by having police across the communities of Scotland, 1,000 extra police, which the Conservative Party in this Parliament, of course, support and say they support, but it's belied by the action of the Conservative Party at Westminster, where they're radically cutting police numbers south of the border. So we take with great care and attention, because reoffending rates are a key issue and concern of this government, suggestions and positive suggestions from anyone in this quarter. But I think in reasonableness that she would concede that the criminal justice system, in terms of what matters, that is the falling rates of recorded crime in Scotland, is performing very well for the people of Scotland.
Ruth Davidson.
Well, the Auditor-General seems to think that what matters is having a reoffending programme that actually works. Audit Scotland says that the government is spending money on programmes not known to work. It says there needs to be stronger national leadership. It says there's a lack of cohesion. It says that reoffending rates are relatively static. It's also looked at the government's plans to make things better, plans that have been up and running for more than 6 months, and they say that there is still an urgent need for improvement, and I quote, in all areas. Communities across Scotland are seeing the same people committing the same crimes, time after time after time, and whatever the First Minister is doing now isn't working. So when is he going to do what Audit Scotland are urging him to do and get serious, not just about crime, but about reoffending?
First Minister.
Well, let's look at some of the initiatives which are designed to tackle reoffending in Scotland and offending, for that matter. I mean, the Violence Reduction Unit, which introduced and supported by this government, which I think commands general support across this chamber. The work against violence against women, including domestic abuse, that work has increased substantially to face that particular problem. The support for victims' rights and compensation. The bill and legislation passed through this Parliament, I think, commands general agreement as well. But I don't agree with Ruth Davidson sweeping aside the reality in terms of the statistics, that recorded crime in Scotland's at a 37-year low. I mean, that must indicate some aspects of a justice system which is performing very well for the people of Scotland. And I do urge her to look very carefully at the interventions which have been budgeted for by this government under great difficulties and stringencies of the intervention funds, both for early years and for reoffending, to give exactly the sort of national leadership that we believe is necessary to continue and pursue our assault on crime rates in Scotland. But ever so gently can I say to her that if the achievements that have been made have been against a huge stringency in public spending. I don't really see why threatening to cut the Scottish budget by over £1 billion, as she did this week, is going to help the spending on criminal justice, on public services, on the National Health Service, or any other area of Scottish life. Now, if that's the programme that the Conservative Party want to pursue, then so be it. But don't come along to this chamber and constantly argue for public spending being directed in key areas when you're simultaneously proposing a further £1 billion cut in that budget.
Graham Pearson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister, what is the Scottish Government's position on the compensation received by William Beggs as a result of delays to his appeals?
First Minister.
He contested vigorously the case, and that was the Scottish Government's position. Of course, we have to accept the court judgment. We have no choice in that matter. But the Scottish Government's position, I suspect the position of this entire chamber, was to pursue vigorously against that compensation claim.
Graham Pearson.
I thank the First Minister for that response. Would the First Minister agree that the public generally, and certainly the communities across Ayrshire, find such awards extremely distasteful? And would he assure this Parliament that his government will take steps to minimise the opportunities that prisoners take advantage of to receive financial benefit from such events?
That was a bonus question, Mr Pearson. First Minister.
I doubt if there is a single person in Scotland who doesn't believe that award is extremely distasteful. I think we can be reasonably certain that that would command the assent of the overwhelming, indeed almost unanimous view of the Scottish people. The point about opposing the award, and it was opposed vigorously in terms of pursuing the case, indicates the seriousness with which the Scottish Government, and I'm sure other opposition parties, took the matter. But Graham Pearson must know that once the court judgment is made, then we have to follow the court judgment, however distasteful it may be. And therefore, that's why, while he's right to say this is a matter of great distaste for the Scottish people, we have to acknowledge what has happened in a court of law.
Question number 3, Will Rennie.
To ask the First Minister what issues will be discussed at the next meeting of the Cabinet.
First Minister.
Issues of importance to the people of Scotland.
Will Rennie.
I was shocked this morning to read the Daily Record. But in the Daily Record this morning, and this is serious, in the Daily Record this morning, pharmacists were being condemned as methadone barons. Does the First Minister think it's right for frontline health professionals to be attacked for simply carrying out the government's drug strategy, a strategy agreed on a cross-party basis in this very Parliament?
First Minister.
I think it's hugely important that we maintain the cross-party consensus in Scotland's policy against drugs. Almost 20 years ago, I joined a cross-party initiative in Scotland Against Drugs, a cross-party political initiative, and watched that initiative, which was, I think, well-meaning and well-meant, dissolve into acrimony between the competing claims of a variety of treatments and approaches to the drugs issue. And at the end, to some extent, it didn't actually matter who was right and wrong, because so much attention was given to the variety of differences in the treatment that meant that the policy itself was compromised. So I think that the road to recovery policy agreed by this Parliament, across this Parliament, is hugely important. That doesn't mean it's perfect, it doesn't mean it's not capable of improvement and amendment, but maintaining that consensus around the road to recovery, I think, is of paramount importance. And if we don't do that, then we shall fail not just the people suffering from drug abuse and their families, will fail all of the people of Scotland.
Will Rennie.
Can I thank the First Minister for that very sensible response? I'm reassured by what he says. We're now in the situation where the people being attacked by MSPs are not drug dealers or pushers, but the pharmacists in the community working on the drugs programme. It's not easy work. I've seen the work. It's not pleasant, but it benefits everyone. Methadone has cut deaths, it's cut disease, and it cuts crime. MSPs, as the First Minister says, should not be seeking to close down treatment options and attack the staff delivering them. The scandal, actually, to be honest, the scandal is that methadone is not methadone for drug users. It's that drug addiction remains so rampant in one of the world's most wealthiest nations. What leadership can the First Minister provide so that our drug strategy is based on evidence and the expertise of our health professionals?
First Minister.
I don't think that the views which Willie Rennie cite are general across this chamber, and some people are entitled to their views, but I think it's far better to try and achieve the consensus around the road to recovery, whatever amendments and improvements we choose to make. I think there should be a recognition that the problem is hugely serious, as indicated by the number of drug-related deaths. There also should be a recognition that that pattern of early death was set some time ago in terms of many of the tragedies and individual tragedies that these statistics reflect. But there's also indications in terms of dropping drug use among young people in Scotland. The incidence of drug use across the general population in Scotland is also falling. And that's not to minimise the scale of the problem. It just shows that there are some hopeful signs if we keep a coherent approach to this huge social issue and try to unite behind it. But I am absolutely certain that we can only do that if we can come, as we've done before as a Parliament, and unite around a consensus policy so that people know that the key thing about this is not to score points off each other, but to unite around a strategy which can actually help and assist the people we're here to serve.
Question number 4, Maureen Watt.
To ask the First Minister what impact fungal diseases will have on trees in Scotland.
First Minister.
Well, can I thank Maureen Watt for raising this hugely important issue. Members will be aware that ash dieback has been detected at some sites in Scotland. Over the weekend, at the start of this week, Forestry Commission officials worked around the clock, completing a rapid survey to identify potential distribution of the disease in Scotland. I'm sure the Chamber will join me in thanking all of those who helped undertake this work. We've also responded to requests for assistance from Forestry Commission England this week and set 15 staff to help complete their survey. I can inform the Chamber that, as of this morning, there were 11 sites in Scotland with confirmed signs of the disease. Because infection from ash dieback is seasonal, we have a window of opportunity to further develop our plans to mitigate its impact. And the Environment Minister, Paul Wheelhouse, will convene a summit of key stakeholders this coming Tuesday to take that stage and process forward.
Maureen Watt.
Can I thank the First Minister for that answer, and can I be the first person in this chamber to sincerely congratulate the First Minister on becoming Scotland's longest-serving First Minister? Given that it would appear that the UK Government may not have released advice in relation to the vulnerability of ash trees as speedily as they could have done, and that there's now speculation that a threat could exist to our iconic Scots pines, what information and advice can the First Minister give to those concerned about their potential susceptibility?
First Minister.
Now, the Forestry Commission have been undertaking regular surveys of the pine species. We are monitoring the impact on Scots pine closely. Trials of forest management techniques and chemical treatments are underway to identify ways to manage the risk that the disease poses to these trees. We're doing everything we can as a government to protect, as the member rightly describes, the Scots pine species, which is truly iconic in Scotland.
Rob Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given the expressions of concern about various species in Scotland, isn't it time we had a national plan in Scotland for tree health and biosecurity, and that this Parliament could take a lead that would set a new tone to this debate in the whole of Britain?
First Minister.
I think that's a very positive suggestion, and I undertake that that's considered at the meeting that will be hosted by Mr Wheelhouse with stakeholders this coming Tuesday.
Question number 5, Jackie Baillie.
To ask the First Minister what steps the Scottish Government is taking to improve treatment for people with dementia.
First Minister.
Well, as Jackie Baillie, I'm sure will agree that the key to effective treatment of dementia is early and accurate diagnosis. The latest figures show that the heat target introduced by the Government have led to a 39% increase in diagnosis of this condition. This is to be welcome, but there is no room for any complacency. In working with Alzheimer's Scotland, we will be putting 300 dementia champions in place next year to ensure people who receive a new diagnosis of dementia are entitled to a minimum of a year's worth of post-diagnostic support. This is further to the announcement just last weekend that all health boards in Scotland have now appointed an Alzheimer's Scotland nurse, as we want to do everything we can for people with dementia, their carers and, of course, their families.
Jackie Baillie.
Can I thank the First Minister for his response and very much welcome the progress made. I'm sure he would agree that the 14 additional specialist nurses does need to be set against the cut of 2,500 in the overall number of nurses across Scotland. Could I bring to the First Minister's attention a Freedom of Information response from NHS Fife, which says that during 2011, the highest number of bed or ward moves for a dementia patient in a single hospital stay was 13. Does the First Minister share my view that this number of moves for dementia patients is unacceptable, and what measures will he take to eradicate the practice of boarding out from our NHS?
First Minister.
Well, it's precisely why we've introduced inspections of hospitals to address such concerns. But can I just say to Jackie Baillie that her comments about the appointments, I think, do her less than credit. And I think I would prefer the views of Henry Simons, the Chief Executive of Alzheimer's Scotland, who said, and I quote, "Completing these appointments is a significant milestone in our attempt to ensure that people with dementia and their families within general hospitals are treated with the utmost dignity and respect at all times." He gets the point which Jackie Baillie fails to get, that these appointments are directly to ensure that people with dementia and their families are treated properly across our excellent National Health Service.
Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the First Minister provide an assurance that driving the National Dementia Strategy forward will be enhanced by the Integrated Social Care Strategy?
First Minister.
Yes, I can, and I'm sure that it will. I mean, this is Scotland's first dementia strategy that was completed in 2010, has now been taken forward. I think it reflects the recognition, which I'm sure is shared across the Chamber, that this condition is of extraordinary seriousness in modern Scotland.
Margaret MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm glad to hear the last part of the First Minister's answer, but I have my doubts, because the people who are working in the integration of health and social care services at ground level just now are under great stress. They're trying to do everything at the one time. I would imagine that this might be an extra task too far, and so I'll be getting in touch with the Health Minister to get an assurance about how this is going to be carried out, if that's all right with the First Minister.
First Minister.
Well, I'm sure that Margaret MacDonald's efforts in this direction are much appreciated, and that is part of the process to ensure that our National Health Service responds, as I believe it does, to the needs of the Scottish population.
Question number 6, Liz Smith.
To ask the First Minister what support the Scottish Government is providing to female college students.
First Minister.
Well, the number of women students attending colleges has been maintained at 65,000 full-time equivalent places. This is the same level that was delivered in 2006-2007, and that's been achieved through the Scottish Government's support for college students, including a 42% increase in funding for childcare, which is of crucial importance to many female students.
Liz Smith.
I thank the First Minister for his answer. Could he therefore explain how the 26% decline in female student numbers since 2007, which is twice the rate of the decline in male student numbers, sits with the Scottish Government's promises to widen access and to maintain overall student numbers?
First Minister.
Well, the position, as I've stated to Liz Smith, on full-time equivalent places, it's true that the Scottish Government is concentrating on full-time courses because these are the courses which prepare people for employment. It's also true that we've expanded student support in colleges to record levels in order to enable people to attend these full-time courses. It's also true we're expanding funding by 42% for childcare so that female students in particular are not disadvantaged. Can I say two further things to Elizabeth Smith? I mean, the credibility of the Conservative Party on this matter would be somewhat greater if it wasn't for what's happening to the revenue and the capital budget south of the border in terms of colleges, where the pressure is infinitely greater than it is in Scotland. And finally, is there going to be some acknowledgement at any time from Elizabeth Smith that this year in Scotland we've got the highest number of full-time students at college and university at any time since this Parliament was reconvened? Isn't that a matter for some celebration?
That ends First Minister's questions. We now move to members' business. Members who leave the chamber should do so quickly and quietly.